We are now live. Shalom, shalom, everyone. Welcome to the weekly Tuesday night Torah study hosted by MTOI, Messianic Torah Observant Israel. Welcome to all those returning and to all guests. Welcome. We hope your stay here and your study is a pleasant one. We will aim to make it as positive as possible and welcoming to everybody. Everyone is really wonderful at doing that. And so here on another Tuesday night, your host David Botwick-Reese up here in Alberta with our Nasi, Rabbi Steve, on vacation. So for those new, we're going to read the portion, and then we will have a midrash to discuss how we see ourselves in the portion and really focus on the useful aspects of where it connects to our halacha, our walk, as we are walking day by day and step by step to become more like Yeshua. See, Beth Smith says, so excited. My Chanukiah is supposed to arrive on Friday. Awesome. Rabbi Tom, no problem. Stay as long as you want. Appreciate your presence and support as always. There's Zaken, Rav Tom, our elder. So as we usually do here in our tradition and custom, MTOI, we will start with prayer requests and praise reports. So feel free to type them in to the chat box here. If you would like to share with a mic, please raise your hand and we can get you the microphone. So we like to gather the praises and prayers since we gathered as a group last, which would have been Shabbat, but in this format it would be last Tuesday. So type them in. I see multiple attendees typing, and I will read them out. Again, there's no extra oomph or power to having them read out loud. We know that our Creator knows exactly what we need before we even need it. But if you would like it to be read or something to be noted or spoken of, go right ahead. Unspoken from Cheryl in Oregon. Prayer request from Kelly West for several unspokens. From Shira, Shalom, Shira, for wisdom, discernment, and boldness. From Ali, down under, praise Yahweh for his many blessings, both known and unknown. Also a prayer request, an operation tomorrow, so prayers that everything goes Yah's way with no complications would be greatly appreciated. Praise from Rob and Tamara Wyatt. We have internet connectivity now. Awesome. Missed out on live readings from the last few weeks. Now working in Huntsville. From Janice, praise for my Uber driver, a young woman who is new to Torah and is interested in the teachings Rabbi has to offer. Her name is Jermaine. That's cool. Thanks for sharing. From Shamash Robert, prayers for travel mercy for my wife and her sister Nolvi. They are going to South Georgia to be another sister, Margie, as she undergoes surgery tomorrow on her ankle. Prayer also for Margie that they do not have to amputate her ankle and that they find no cancer. They just recently lost their oldest sister, Nasli, excuse my pronunciation, to cancer. And there's a couple operations happening simultaneously in the body. Several unspoken from Rachel J. Big things happening in my whole family this year. Praises from Alicia and Matthew Cooper for a nephew's successful surgery and doing great. From Crystal, prayers for Rabbi Steve, Rabbi St. Julie, and family to have a safe, fun, and relaxing vacation. Amen to that. Safe, fun, and relaxing. And even though they're not going to be there on a Shabbat, of course, may they be rested and may they be refreshed in their travels and their time away. From Rick Berry, prayer for Kevin Shedd, who was moved 2 hours ago from the hospital to a manor care for physical rehabilitation. Brother Kevin, I know he had been dealing with some complications from a fall. So definitely lift that up. From Olivier and Janet Hoffman and family, Prayer for Olivier, he still has his back sciatica. From Greg, prayer for Joanne, please. She has cataract surgery tomorrow morning. Wow, another surgery. Definitely keep these in prayer. May everything go smoothly and all those operating and attending be touched by Yah's wisdom and strength and intelligence and witness to him, indeed. Unspoken from Chuck in Minneapolis. Michelle Voorhees, prayer for wisdom in a decision concerning moving my father. He is becoming unable to live on his own. From Janice, prayer for my shalom as I am still unable to find a job, seeking Yahweh's will. Amen. His will and will alone. Unspoken from Alice Corey, praying and appreciating our leadership. From Crystal, Claudia, praises to Abba. The pain I had in my left side last week went bye-bye, and the very next day, after you prayed, prayer need for the cat situation. Have a convalescent stray cat in the room, and my cats are not very happy. Thanks. You're welcome. From Mary Susan, my mother-in-law, who's in this walk for 67 years and spry and active, dropped dead yesterday morning. She was my role model for 36 years. In future will be a blessing, but now the grief is great. Yeah. Sorry to hear that. Her memory be for a blessing. Stephen Gwen Waffle, prayer for Rabbi Steve and family. They receive the rest and blessing needed and deserved on vacation. From Terry Ramlow, on behalf of our sister Yanni in Denmark, please pray regarding her son Emil, only about 12 years old, a head injury on the soccer field. Emil is currently in a coma. Her family wants her to just return to them. This is painfully devastating. Wow. Anne, in Northeast Ohio, my father-in-law was hit by a car in a parking lot by a large truck last night. He died shortly thereafter. Please pray for the family and especially his widow. Thank you. Absolutely. A lot to pray for tonight, brothers and sisters. A lot indeed. The Reds, the situation with the sale of our house in Virginia has gotten complicated. It looks like we'll have to bring $4,500 to the table to close. Prayers for provision and wisdom, as well as some unspokens. Chris Robbins, prayers for my daughter who will be studying abroad in Liverpool, England in January 2019. Prayers indeed, and sounds like an awesome opportunity. David and Amy, praying ice cream machine is working for Rabbi. Also for Leanne, who saw orthopedic today for shoulder broken last Friday. Dave and Christine says, sorry to hear that. Anne in Ohio, Amen. Terry adds, Yanni's determined to stay strong, but she is understandably distressed. Her mother died only weeks ago, and she's still in mourning. Alana, shalom everyone, unspoken prayers, please and thank you. Shamash Robert, prays that a life-threatening infection I had last Monday that was expected to take a month of extensive and strong antibiotics is completely gone as of my checkup this morning, and I have a clean bill of health. Amen. Glad to hear that, Robert. Carrie Geffart, unspoken prayer. Sarah Beth prays I had a victory at work today. Brian and Jamie, prayer request, our daughter, Becky, and her husband, Trevor, lost the house they've been working on for almost 6 months. After financing problems, which were solved, and 2 independent appraisals showing the fair market value was significantly less than the selling price, the seller backed out of the purchase because he would not sell for the appraisal valuation. They're very disheartened, but must start over. Chuck says, unable to read due to technical problems. No worries, brother. Nancy says, much to pray and give thanks for. Praise report from Trudy. Shalom. South African couple who was allowed to come to Manitoba, Canada on a farm visa heard this week the first step to sell their farm in South Africa was accepted. This is a huge praise if we take in considerations that South African farms are not selling at all anymore. Paperwork is going to be taken to the South African lawyers in January. Please pray that God's will be done for them and for continued peace. Their name, Gert and Mariana Becker. Indeed. And welcome to Canada. From Rabbi Tom and Rabbi Joanne, Prayer for several healings for me and for Joanne. David and Amy says Vince from Lev Mashiach passed yesterday morning. I did not know that, so thank you for adding that. Stephen Gwen Waffle prays for a full calendar through February. From Raymond Ramlo, Shalom Achi, praising Abba that our Nasi Steve is able to take a little family vacation. May their refreshing and recharging be very blessed. From Leanne, praise no surgery required at this time for shoulder I broke on Shabbat, or Erev Shabbat. Praise from friend's assistance and humbling through being dependent. That's a great praise, humbling through being dependent. I know Rebbetzin Joanne shared something similar on the live stream a couple weeks ago, and it's always a very great lesson to learn. A humbling one indeed, like you said, so thank you for bringing that up. Terry Ramlo, prayer for a family friend, Tristan, who is learning about Torah. He is in the hospital for a shoulder surgery due to injuries suffered during seizures. Aaron Sullivan, I am officially on the hunt for a house, apartment, and job in Cleveland, Tennessee. Wow, great to hear. Prayers for that, please, and for wisdom and patience in dealing with the family trials that are sure to come as we make this move. Amen. See a couple more people typing. I'd also like to add my mother-in-law, Maria Elena Romero, in Mexico. She fell yesterday, and praise Hashem that it was nothing worse than a little swelling, but seems indeed a lot of accidents and surgeries. And my father and mother were in a car accident a week and a half ago, and car was totaled, but praise Yah that they were okay, but still dealing some with recovery. So it seems like a lot of accidents and slips and falls, and then more seriously, many family deaths yesterday and just in the past couple of days. So this is why we gather together to see and hear where everyone is, what everyone is going through, because it's very important to understand that. Lorraine Hasbrook, unspoken, please. Stephanie adds praise Yah to Trudy's prayer for answered prayer and praise for the farm for the Beckers. We'll continue to pray for favor in January. Jack and Jess Ann in Ohio, favor in our adoption of our grandson. Amen. Last couple prayers, and then we will continue. From Freddie Gonzalez in Michigan, shalom everyone, unspoken prayers please. From Gary Flint, MTOI Lakeview, prayer as McKay has been ill. Prayers for me as I begin school again and be able to manage the time and schedule. Praise that we have had some vehicle issues resolved. Amen. Crystal, praise to be above ground. Indeed. Wake up every morning. And it is by the Almighty's will that we have another day. David and Amy adds, praise Yah for the 94 participants here and for those yet to join us. Amen. Those yet to join us indeed. In my preparation for leading the study, I go back to the previous years, and it is always amazing to see the number grow year by year, truly exponentially. So it's pretty awesome. So yeah, thanks for joining and making the study what it is, because if it was just me, then it would just me talking to myself, and I already do that enough. So it's you guys who make the study. See, hee-haw, I see a donkey in the pasture tonight. Well, look at that. Shalom, Curtis. Welcome, Ahi, from New Zealand. Yeehaw indeed. Okay, if there's any other prayers and praises, please type them in. If not, we will ask one of the men. Please raise their hand and open us up in prayer. Curtis says, Shalom, everyone. And Raymond adds, praising Abba that I got an extension on the emissions test requirement for my vehicle. I'm going to need it. Hee hee. Things need fixing. All right, hands up, men. We lift all of these prayers and praises at the feet of our Almighty, and then also open the study that everything be guided and led by Him, and by His set-apart Ruach, and it bring glory and honor to Him. So I
Mic check. Abba Father, we humbly come before your throne, thanking you for this opportunity to gather together with you and with our Mishpachah to learn from your Torah. Father, you've heard the requests and the praises and the needs of your children, and we know that you will hear and honor those requests in your will. We pray that it be so, and we pray that we learn everything we need to from this Torah study that we can apply in our lives immediately to honor and glorify you. In Yeshua's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Rick. And for those new, just want to put the number system. Actually, Shamash Rabbi, would you mind putting that in? The 1s, 2, and the 5. Okay, great. Well, we continue with our Torah study tonight, where we have this week's Torah portion is Vayeshev. And so we usually do, just like to see what does the name mean. As we know, it's often in the first verse, so not necessarily ton of significance, but it is a good way to set the stage and understand kind of the flow of where we're going and where we've come from. Okay, and he settled, and he settled, and he dwelt, and he dwelt, and he settled. Absolutely. All of those correct. And so again, if you're new to the study, what we do is we will read the portion, and then we will discuss it. So if you would like to read tonight, please put your hand up. We have 8 readers tonight, covering Bereshit, Genesis, chapters 37, verse 1 to chapter 40, verse 23. And the 8 readers, I will call each reader up with a traditional prayer, the Aliyah prayer, which means to go up. As we go up and read the Torah, we rise up to the word. And then we'll do a quick little quiz. So after tonight's Torah portion, how many portions do we have left in the book of Genesis? Quick. My wife says 2. That's her guess. We have 3 from Nancy, Wyoming. 3 question mark from Beth Smith. 40 from Greg and Mary. He's taking the over on this one. I see some 3s. I see a couple 4s. Not much. Yep, that's correct, Chris. Not much. The answer is 3. 3 not including tonight, 4 including tonight. So pretty amazing to see how time flies. And again, we're on 27th of November, the 19th of Kislev, the 25th of Kislev being the first evening of Hanukkah, which Shamash Robert will quickly discuss in the announcements. He loves to overbid, says Greg. Well, yeah, by about 37. You had the right chapter, right? You had the chapter that we were going to end on. So E for effort. We'll give you that. Okay, so first up in our reading of Parsha Vayeshev, and he dwelt, will be, I can see, is either Arthur and Linda. Who will be reading? Will be Arthur or will be Linda? Arthur. Okay, Arthur. So we will call up Arthur, and then we will begin the reading. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Arthur, who has come up to honor Yahweh, and the Torah. May the set apart one bless him and his family, and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Amen. Okay, Arthur, you're going to take us chapter 37, verses.
Okay. And Jacob dwelt in the land of his father's sojourning, in the land of Canaan. This is the genealogy of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brothers. And the young man was with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought an evil report of them to his father. And Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a long robe. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and were not able to speak peaceably to him. And Joseph dreamed a dream and told it to his brothers, so they hated him even more. And he said to them, "Please listen to this dream which I have dreamed. See, we were binding sheaves in the midst of the field, and see, my sheaf rose up and also stood up. And see, your sheaves stood all around and bowed down to my sheaf." And his brothers said to him, "Shall you indeed reign over us? Shall you indeed rule over us?" So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. And he dreamed still another dream and related it to his brothers and said, "See, I have dreamed another dream, and see, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars bow down to me." And he related to his father and his brothers. And his father rebuked him and said to him, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall we, your mother and I and your brothers, indeed come to bow down to the earth before you?" And his brothers envied him, but his father guarded the word. And his brothers went to feed their father's flocks in Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, "Are not your brothers feeding the flock in Shechem? Come, I send you to them." So he said to him, "Here I am." And he said to him, "Please go and see if it is well with your brothers and well with the sheep, and bring back word to me." So he went to him out of the valley of Hebron, and he went to Shechem. And a certain man found him, and see, he was wandering in the field. And the man asked him, saying, "What do you seek?" And he said, "I'm seeking my brothers. Please inform me where they are feeding their sheep." And the man said, "They have left here, for I heard them say, 'Let us go down towards Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them in Dothan.
Amen. Amen. Toda, Arthur. Thank you, Arthur. And greetings of province over. Next up is Brother Kendall for his aliyah to read. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Kendall, who has come up to honor Yahweh and the Torah. May the set apart one bless him and his family, and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Amen. Okay, Kendall, please take us verse 18 to the end of the chapter, which is verse 36.
Okay. And they saw him from a distance, and before he came near them, they plotted against him to kill him. And they said to each other, "See, this master of dreams is coming. Now then, come, and let us now kill him and throw him into some pit, and shall say, 'Some wild beast has devoured him. Let us then see what comes of his dreams.' But Reuben heard and rescued him from their hands, and said, 'Let us not strike his being.' And Reuben said to them, 'Shed no blood. Throw him into the pit which is in the wilderness, and do not lay a hand on him. in order to rescue him out of their hands and bring him back to his father. So it came to be, when Joseph had come to his brothers, that they stripped Joseph of his robe, the long robe which was on him, and they took him and threw him into a pit. And the pit was empty. There was no water in it. And they sat down to eat a meal. And they lifted their eyes and looked, and saw a company of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels, bearing spices and balm and myrrh, going to take them down to Mitzrayim. And Yehudah said to his brothers, What would we gain if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him. For he is our brother, our flesh. And his brothers listened. And the men, Midianite traders, passed by. So they pulled Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit, and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. And they took Joseph to Mitzrayim. And Reuben returned to the pit, and see, Joseph was not in the pit, and he tore his garments. And he returned to his brothers and said, The boy is gone, and I, where am I to go? So they took Joseph's robe, slew a male goat, and dipped the robe in the blood, and sent the long robe, and brought it to their father, and said, We have found this. Please look, is it the robe of your son or not? And he recognized it, and said, It is my son's robe. An evil beast has devoured him. Joseph is torn to pieces. And Jacob tore his garments, and put sackcloth on his waist, and mourned for his son many days. And all his sons and all his daughters arose to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. And he said, Now let me go down into Sheol to my son in mourning. So his father wept for him. And the Midianites had sold him in Mitzrayim to Potiphar, an officer of...
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Kendall. Next up, we have either Fred or Barb who will be reading, so I can give you the traditional blessing. Fred or Barb, you just type into the chat so I can know.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect. Barb, excuse me. I read the first initial of your last name and completely garbled that. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Barb, who has come up to honor Yahweh and the Torah. May the set-apart one bless her and her family, and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of her hands. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Okay. Barb, you will take us in chapter 38, verses 1 to 14.
Did you say 14?
Yes, verses 1 to 14.
Thank you. And at that time it came to be that Yehudah left his brothers and turned aside to a man, an Adulamite, whose name was Hirah. And Yehudah saw there was a daughter of a certain Canaanite, whose name was Shua. And he took her and went into her. So she conceived and bore a son, and he called his name Er. And she conceived again and bore a son, and she called his name Onan. And she conceived yet again and bore a son, and called his name Shelah. And he was at Kezib when she bore him. And Yehudah took a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. But Yehudah's firstborn, was evil in the eyes of Yahuwah, and Yahuwah took his life. And Yehudah said to Onan, Go in to your brother's wife and marry her, and raise up an heir to your brother. And Onan knew that the offspring would not be his. And it came to be, when he went into his brother's wife, that he spilled on the ground, lest he should give an offspring to his brother. But what he did displeased Yahuwah, so he took his life too. Then Yehudah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, Remain a widow in your father's house until my son Shelah is grown. For he said, Lest he also die as his brothers did. And Tamar went and dwelt in her father's house. And after a long time, the daughter of Shua, Yehuda's wife, died. And Yehuda was comforted and went up to his sheep shearers at Timnah, he and his friend Hirah the Adullamite. And it was reported to Tamar, saying, See, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep. And she took off her widow's garments and covered herself with a veil and wrapped herself, and sat at the entrance to Anayim, which was on the way to Timnah. For she saw that Shelah was grown, and she was not given to him as wife.
Amen. Amen. Thank you for that, Barb. Next up, we have Sue. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Sue, who has come up to honor Yahweh and the Torah. May the set-apart one bless her and her family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of her hands. Amen. Amen. Okay, Sue, you're going to finish chapter 38, which is verses 15 to 30.
Thank you. Mic check? Great. And Yehuda saw her and reckoned her for a whore, for she had covered her face. And he turned aside to her by the way and said, Please let me come in to you, for he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. And she said, What do you give me to come in to me? And he said, Let me send you a young goat from the flock. And she said, Do you give me a pledge until you send it? So he said, What pledge should I give you? And she said, Your seal and your cord and your staff that is in your hand. And he gave them to her and went in to her, and she conceived by him. And she arose and went away and removed her veil and put on the garments of her widowhood. And Yehuda sent the young goat by the hand of his friend, the Adullamite, to receive his pledge from the woman's hand, but he did not find her. And he asked the men of that place, saying, Where is the cult prostitute who was beside the way to Enayim? And they said, There was no cult prostitute in this place. And he returned to Yehuda and said, I have not found her. And the men of the place also said, There was no cult prostitute in this place. And Yehuda said, Let her take them for herself, lest we become despised. For I sent this young goat, and you have not found her. And it came to be about 3 new moons after that Yehuda was informed, saying, Tamar, your daughter-in-law, has whored, and see, she has conceived by whoring. And Yehuda said, Bring her out, and let her be burned. When she was brought out, she sent to her father-in-law, saying, By the man to whom these belong, I am pregnant. And she said, Please examine whose these are, the seal and the cord and the staff. And Yehuda examined and said, She has been more righteous than I, because I did not give her to Shelah, my son, and he never knew her again. And it came to be at the time for giving birth that twins were in her womb. And it came to be when she was giving birth that the one put out his hand, and the midwife took a scarlet thread and bound it on his hand, saying, This one came out first. And it came to be, as he drew back his hand, that his brother came out. And she said, How did you break through? This breach be upon you. So his name was called Peretz. And afterward his brother came out, who had the scarlet thread on his hand. So his name was called Zerah.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Sue. And Barb, your hand is still up, so if you can, please lower it at your earliest convenience. Next up, we have Mr. Steve Waffle. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Steve, who has come up to honor Yahweh and the Torah. May the set-apart one bless him and his family. and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Amen. Okay, Steve, you're going to start chapter 39 for us, verses 1 to 12.
Alrighty, here we go here. Alright. And Joseph had taken down to Mitzrayim and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, a Mitzrayim, bought him from the Yishmaelites who had taken him down there. And it came to be that Yahweh was with Joseph, and he became Potiphar, prosperous man, and was in the house with his master, the Midian. And his master saw Yahweh was with him, that Yahweh had made all he did to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found favor in his eyes, and served him, and appointed him over his house, and gave into his hand all that he had. And it came to be from the time that he appointed him over his house and all that he had, that Yahweh blessed the Mitzrayim, the house of Joseph's, for Mitzrayim's house, for Joseph's sakes, and the blessing of Yahweh was on all that he had in the house and in the field. And he left in Joseph's hands all that he had, and he did not know what he had except for the bread which he ate. And Joseph was handsome in form and handsome in appearance. And after these events it came to be that his master's wife lifted up her eyes to Joseph and said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said to his master's wife, "Look, my master does not know what is with me in the house, and he has given into my hands all that he has. No one is greater in this house than I, and he has not withheld whatever from me but you, because you are his wife. And how shall I do this great evil and sin against Elohim?" And it came to be, as she spoke to Joseph day by day, that he did not listen to her and lie with her to be with her. And it came to be on a certain day, when Joseph went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house was inside, that she caught him by his garment, saying, "Lie with me." But he left his garment in her hand, and fled and ran.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Steve. Next up to read, we have Mark. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Mark, who has come up to honor Yahweh and the Torah. May the set-apart one bless him and his family, and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Amen. Okay, Mark, you will finish chapter 39, verses 13 to 23.
And it came to be, when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand, and fled outside, that she called to the men of her house, and spoke to them, saying, "See, he has brought into us a Hebrew to mock us. He came in to me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. And it came to be, when he heard that I lifted my voice and cried out, that he left his garment with me, and fled and went outside. And she kept his garment with her until his master came home. And she spoke to him these same words, saying, The Hebrew servant whom you brought to us came in to me to mock me. So it came to be, as I lifted my voice and cried out, that he left his garment with me and fled outside. And it came to be, when his master heard the words which his wife spoke to him, saying, Your servant did to me according to these words, that his displeasure burned. Then Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the sovereign's prisoners were confined, and he was there in the prison. But Yahweh was with Yosef and extended loving commitment to him, and he gave him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. And the prison warden gave into the hand of Yosef all the prisoners who were in the prison, and whatever was done there was his doing. The prison warden did not look into any point that was under Yosef's hands, because Yahweh was with him, and whatever he did, Yahweh made it prosper.
Amen. Amen. Yahweh made it prosper. Awesome. Okay, next up we have Rick, second to last reader for the evening in Vayeshev. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and he blessed Rick, who has come up to honor Yahweh and the Torah. May the set apart one bless him and his family, and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Amen. Okay, Rick, start chapter 40, verses 1 to 11, please.
Mic check. And after these events it came to be that the cupbearer and the baker of the sovereign of Mitzrayim sinned against their master, the sovereign of Mitzrayim. And Pharaoh was wroth with his two officers, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker. So he put them in confinement in the house of the captain of the guard, in the prison, the place where Yosef was a prisoner. And the captain of the guard put Yosef in charge of them, and he served them. So they were in confinement for some time. Then the cupbearer and the baker of the sovereign of Mitzrayim, who were confined in the prison, dreamed a dream, both of them, each man's dream in one night, and each man's dream with its own interpretation. And Yosef came in to them in the morning and looked at them and saw that they were sad. And he asked Pharaoh's officers who were with him in the confinement of his master's house, saying, "Why do you look so sad today?" And they said to him, "We each have dreamed a dream, and there is no one to interpret it." And Yosef said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to Elohim? Relate them to me, please." So the chief cupbearer related his dream to Yosef, and said to him, "See, in my dream a vine was before me, and in the vine were 3 branches, and it was as though it budded, its blossoms shot forth, and its clusters brought forth ripe grapes. And Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, so I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand."
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Rick. And then finally, our last reader for the evening, none other than Achi Raymond. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Raymond, who has come up to honor Yahweh and the Torah. May the set apart one bless him and his family, and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Amen. Okay, Raymond, you're going to finish chapter 40, verses 12 to 23.
Mic check. And Yosef said to him, "This is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches are 3 days. Yet, within 3 days, Pharaoh is going to lift up your head and restore you to your place, and you shall put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, according to the former ruling, when you were his cupbearer. But remember me when it is well with you, and please show loving commitment to me, and mention me to Pharaoh, and get me out of this house. For truly I was stolen away from the land of the Hebrews, and also I have done naught that they should put me into the dungeon." And the chief baker saw that the interpretation was good, and he said to Yosef, "I also was in my dream, and saw 3 white baskets were on my head, and in the uppermost basket all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh. And the birds ate them out of the basket on my head." And Yosef answered and said, "This is the interpretation of it. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Yet Within 3 days, Pharaoh is going to lift off your head from you and hang you on a tree, and the birds shall eat your flesh from you. And on the 3rd day, Pharaoh's birthday, it came to be that he made a feast for all his servants, and he lifted up the head of the chief cupbearer and of the chief baker among his servants. And he restored the chief cupbearer to his post of cupbearer again, and he placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker, as Yosef had interpreted to them. And the chief cupbearer did not remember Yosef, but forgot him.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Raymond. And thank you to all the readers, brothers and sisters who read before us all tonight. And also thank you to all the listeners, because sometimes when you're listening, you can hear something and something sticks out to you that doesn't quite happen when you're actively reading. So thank you for both reading and listening to the Word of the Almighty. And if you're new and you'd like to read another time, feel free at the beginning of the study just to type in, and we'll definitely get you the opportunity to read if you've never read before. So I'll read the traditional closing blessing and we will go forward. Baruch atah Yahweh Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Yahweh noten haTorah. Amen. Blessed are you, Yahweh our Elohim, King of the universe, who has given us a Torah of truth and has planted eternal life in our midst. Blessed are you, Yahweh, giver of the Torah. Amen. Amen. Okay, well, we'll take a momentary pause before the Midrash to have Shamash Robert come and announce a couple things. I will mute myself.
All right. Well, we've got a few announcements, just very short ones. Yes, the cruise is going well. The ice cream machine is fully functioning, so he's happy. Been talking with them basically daily. December 2nd will be the first candle lighting. We will not be streaming that, but that will be the night of the first candle lighting is December 2nd. On December 8th will be the 7th candle, and we will live stream that, and then we will immediately after the streaming that, we'll go into Rosh Chodesh Tevet. So that will be on December 8th, and so we'll be live streaming the 7th candle lighting and going straight into Rosh Chodesh Tevet. December 16th, we'll have all our meetings, the 10 o'clock for South Africa leadership, noon for all the MTOI leadership, and 8 p.m. is the Eastern time is the general session. All times I give are Eastern time for those that don't know that. Passover has been locked in at the YMCA Blue Ridge Assembly. So for planning purposes, we will be going back to the YMCA at the Blue Ridge Assembly. They have not actually given us the contract yet, so we have to wait on the contract to get the confirmation of pricing before we put anything on the website. But that should be next week as soon as they get back. So the time, let me look at that time. I didn't write that down. I guess that time here in just a second. Let me see. We are looking at sorry. Here we go. Yeah, it's on the 8th. It will be 7 p.m. 7 p.m. is when we're going to be starting that live stream on the 8th. So I think that's about it for the live, for the announcements. So if anybody's got any questions or has anything I missed, please let me know. But yes, Saturday, December the 8th at 7 p.m. is live stream for the 7th candle lighting and Rosh Kadesh Tevet. So
Great. Thank you, Shamash Robert. And for those interested, the 3 teachings that Rabbi has put out about Hanukkah are pinned in the MTOI Facebook group. So if you do not have access to that group, please request it and I will add you. There will also be a post from the MTOI Facebook page going out Sunday morning, a Hanukkah themed greeting post with the links to the teachings as well. And maybe Shamash can put them here too as well. Might as well cover all our bases. Story of Hanukkah is the one on video, and then A Time to Rededicate Yourself, part 1 and part 2 are both on Podomatic. I listened to the story of Hanukkah, re-listened to it again this morning, and really always brings you to tears, honestly. Pretty transformative and puts it in a new light for sure. Okay, well, we will continue now with the study. And as per the structures and protocol and guidance, we're really going to focus on, if you had to kind of divide it in useful, interesting, entertaining, we'll definitely cover some interesting, and this study is always entertaining, but we always, per our Nasi, per Rabbi Steve's instructions, focus on the useful. Where do you see yourself in the portion? How can you apply this to your walk? How do we take this? And once the study is over, once the room is closed, how do we become more like Yeshua? Which is ultimately the goal. We know that. And so where do we see ourselves in this portion? Where do we see our Messiah in this portion? So much, so rich, we could spend hours, as you know. So I see Steve Waffle. Go right ahead.
All right. I always try to find something so it can apply. So in Genesis 1, 37, 117, to me, the number one thing that I see in this is when we let jealousy rule our lives from one to another. It brings discord, envy, and division, and it tends to ruin friendships, relationships, regardless family or not family. So that would be something I would want to take heed to not let whatever it would be cause me to feel jealous of another brother or even a family member because of what was given them rather than me. So that's something that's what I got out of the beginning there. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you, Steve. Absolutely. Jealousy being something that is not what we want to be harboring. Definitely relates to the root of bitterness, the coveting, and as we know from Rabbi Steve, that you look at the 10 Commandments, and really most of them are coming from coveting. So we can see how that is such a big root that can lead us down the path to all of the other ones. Why do we worship, other quote mighty ones? Well, we covet what they might give us. Why do we, commit adultery? Well, because we're coveting something else besides the wife that we've been given, or the husband that we've been given, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you for bringing that up. The jealousy is definitely important, and something that, we need to deal with. Because at the end of the day, and we talk about this a lot, we really need to be satisfied with what we have and appreciative, because that appreciation will lead to more appreciation and content. But it's really easy to always, as the expression goes, think the grass is greener on the other side. A couple people saying Lila Tov. Good night. Thank you for joining. Beth Smith says, I saw in chapter 37 that Yosef wasn't very tactful in relating his dreams, so the takeaway would be to be careful with my words. Amen. And yeah, that was actually me relating that to the previous point by Steve, is that, when we possibly have something, related to the Almighty, relating to, this inheritance, this blessing that we've been given. We really need to be humble about that relationship. Yosef, as it seems here, maybe he didn't even think or was trying to rub it in his brothers' faces. Maybe he didn't even know what to do with it. The account says he's only 17, but also he's 17. He needs to be careful throwing that, we could say, with reckless zeal and just sharing. So I think that's definitely an aspect of that. And that relates also to the jealousy, is because the brothers, rather than possibly seeing that this was something that was given from above, they got attached to the person because of the family dynamic rather than being attached to the dream itself. So agreed. Thank you, Beth, for bringing that up, that we should not just share our relationship with the Almighty with everybody. We have to be very careful who we tell what to. And I think that's both in person, on social media, everything. I think we need to be careful because he did not know his audience. And look what happened.
Yeah, exactly. And to that point, we want to remember always that just as the Torah gives us the obligation to love our neighbors as ourselves and to not slander, etc., that applies not only to people that are alive today, but also to the people that this book was written about. And we certainly want to be careful how we cast these characters, because they're real people. And one thing that we think about with Yosef, why did he talk this way? We have no reason to say it was out of any evil motivation or any lack of character. In fact, the character and integrity that we see from him all the way through the story is outstanding. And so we can see, as was being said a little bit ago, that it's most likely he was just naive. And we do see this feature. As somebody else was remarking in the chat, 17-year-olds haven't changed a lot. We see this feature with the youth where they have difficulty processing the ripples, processing the consequences of their decisions before they make them, and deciding accordingly with what will give the best outcome. And so there's something in here for us, and that is, this is something that happened not only when you are physically a teenager, when you are physically not yet mature, but this is also something that happens when we are spiritually not yet mature. This is something that happens when we are brand new to this faith and this community, when we've just gone under the water, just received the laying on of hands. Maybe for some of you, this only happened very recently. And one of the things that we have with that is it's like this whole new world is opening up to us. But because we don't yet fully understand it, and we have not yet had our senses exercised, as it were, to discern good and evil, we don't have a systemic understanding of our faith, and we don't have a systemic understanding of our community. We sometimes do things that someone with a little bit more ability to process and reflect would see as very unwise. And so this is one of the values. This is where we can all be very thankful if we are young in this, if we're not yet elders. We can be very thankful that we have a community to be part of, because it's having the community that helps reflect some of that. We have a mirror to look at, not just in the Torah, but in how we create reactions in others in the community. And even better than that, many interfacing with this community have relationships with the leadership where they can be guided, and they can receive guidance, and they can receive counsel. And so one of the things that we can learn from Yosef here is, even with the best of intentions, we can spark off a really painful series of events just by the power of you don't know what you don't know.
Amen. And that connects to Greg's comment here. We're all older teenagers. Hi, my name is fill in the blank, and I don't know as much as I think I do. Absolutely. And yeah, thank you, Raymond, for bringing that up. We're all so new, and I see that I think Shira might have put that we were all a lot like Yosef when our eyes are opened. And it's a good thing to understand our own gifts and talents. She also added to seek them to bless others. But also, like Raymond said, we're so new, and we come into this, and we have to be careful who we're sharing to, because even though the intention might be really good, maybe we don't know the best way to handle it. Maybe even in that conversation, it's not bearing the best fruit, which I think relates to this time of year as well. We have to bear good fruit and bear witness, and not engage in attacks, and not engage in picking on people that were us, as Rabbi says 5 minutes ago. So absolutely. Scroll up here. We said maybe Yosef should have his mouth closed. Was he sowing discord? Knowing his brothers would react this way? Yeah, well, we don't know. I mean, again, it doesn't really show much. But there was a question by Hoffman family about whether the evil report that Yosef gave to his father regarding his brothers was lashon hara, the evil tongue, or because he thought they were bringing shame to his father. They say, I suppose we can assume the character of the brothers was not righteous, and Yosef was righteous. Yeah, but I think also, we could possibly take it as we also have to be careful about talking about family and others, even if their behavior is not righteous. We must be careful not to slander, and of course, that's a difference between, bringing an account and describing to the best of our ability without bias, which is pretty impossible. But do our best, but it's very different than we know with lashon hara, which is intentionally trying to, slander and shame others. So, yeah, I mean, we know that Yosef was righteous here. We also know that at that time he's 17, so maybe he's learning something about, how to deal with the family as well, and something we can learn from. I see Shamash Robert here saying, and I think in light of some recent counseling, also perhaps a lesson to share the truth with boldness, regardless of the possible results to ourselves. Yah has the end results in his hands and will ultimately take care of you. Amen. Yeah. And so that connects right to the point from the Hoffmans that even possibly, what the report was being given, and even if it was something that maybe he didn't handle the best and was being open about it, he was doing what he thought would be righteous and was explaining these dreams, and all the brothers had their own stuff to work out. And yes, agreed, Ginny. Like Raymond said, 17-year-olds have not changed much in thousands of years. Okay, scroll up here. A second. In verse 11, Arthur points out that Yaakov, the father, guarded the word. In other words, it is good just to keep our thoughts to ourselves. Amen. I also think possibly it shows that even if you maybe don't agree with something personally, to have faith in the Almighty and to ruminate on it, especially if we know that it could possibly be coming from a higher authority, the higher authority. So thank you, Arthur, for that. I agree completely. We need to guard, right? Shomer, to keep it close to us. And so he definitely felt, even if the verse before, and there's a couple interpretations on the rebuking of Yosef. One interpretation is that he was using it to actually deflect the rebuking, so his brothers would think that Yosef was being chastised, but really Yaakov believed him. But also he could have been rebuking the authority, or Yosef saying, Yosef, you're a young kid. I believe what you're saying, but you need to learn how to handle it appropriately. But thank you for bringing that to light. Nancy says the brothers doing this to Yosef came from Leah's mothering, and perhaps her sense of having been rejected prejudiced her and Zilpah's sons against him. The lesson here is that our attitudes leach out into our family members. Amen. I think someone, I forget who it was, Chuck added about we have to be careful not to show favoritism. The why can't you be like your brother sister phenomenon, which can cause jelly, despise the other sibling, or as Nancy brings to light from the parents. We know Yaakov favored Rachel and then favors Yosef, and that causes some possible issues. Okay. Beth adds, yes. Robert, even if bad things come as a result, this portion informs us that Abba is with us regardless. David and Amy say this whole Torah portion remind me Yah can weave a beautiful tapestry out of some very snarly threads. Okay, Beth has a question about 38. We'll address that in a second. Because, yes, speaking of weaving threads, Hoffman's asked about Yosef's robe. Sure, we can address that. And so with the robe, we'll just do a quick little poll just to see, because, there have been a couple different ways of framing it. We know Broadway has a certain way of presenting it, the Technicolor dream coat. So let's bring it back to the word. The verb in Hebrew, the word is tenet pasim, I believe. And so how many of you believe it was a robe of, if you think it's a robe of colors, put in a 6, a robe of strips of material, 7, and a robe of lengths, put 8. So colors for 6, materials for 7, lengths for 8. So we have quite a few. Well, we could possibly say you could all be right. How about that? The linguistic study, the most common is that it would be of many lengths or many materials, but really the important aspect here, regardless of the colors, and we know from also Rabbi's explanation on tzitziot that it would have been pretty expensive to have many different colored dyes. The real question is, it could be a mixture of all, that this is a coat of what? What does the coat signify? Robe denoting authority, royalty, favor, authorities, leadership, authority. Yeah, so all of those really, if you wrap them up into the key, is the authority aspect, the covering, the garment, right? The inheritance that we know that Yaakov favors Yosef. Rachel, it sets him apart from his brothers as favored. Right, and so David and Amy said favor, favored son, the authority. So this is something that, regardless of really what we know it looked like, the key is that it's authority, and we'll do another little quick quiz here just to kind of pull it together. Can you name another scriptural account of someone wearing a similar robe and its relation to authority? I know it's a tough one, and I didn't know this before studying the earlier recordings of the Torah portion. Tamar, Robin Vaughn, great question, or great answer. Sorry, this is David's daughter. This is in 2 Samuel 13. So the mantle, that was a little bit different. That could have been more like a talit, perhaps. But yes, the robe there is in 2 Samuel 13, which also relates to a stealing or raping of authority, which relates to here too, with the aspect of Yosef. And so now we're gonna take it to our Messiah. Somebody's mic is on.
Me, Barbara.
Please mute that. Okay. You could mute, or if you have something to say, just raise your hand and we'll.
If I may.
All right, 1 second.
Okay.
Is that when? Just 1 second, Barbara. I'm just going to finish this thought. That when we put on the coat of heirship, which is the coat in honor of Yeshua, and given the inheritance of Israel from the Father, we, like Yosef, can become a target. Because that authority, that favor, that inheritance given to us we can become a target like Yosef to his brothers. And so in that targeting, I think it's an important, and Yosef shows this. Somebody talked about his forgiveness. A lesson for us to be kind and like our Messiah. Even at the stake, forgive them, Father. So this time of year and any other time, in this inheritance that we're given, even though it might seem like the attacks are personal, Messiah himself, even when he was...
Okay, I would like to speak to everyone about Joseph's long time in prison. Fred and I have had a prison ministry for 22 years, and we have met a man who was sentenced to 6 life sentences. His name is Michael Curls. His crime, drugs, at 22. And he used a gun once to hold up a 7-Eleven, but ran out of the store from fear. He never hurt anyone. He has an uncle on his stepfather's side who plays golf with a particular judge who sentenced him to 6 life sentences so he could never, ever receive his inheritance / business of his stepfather. He's now 54 years old and has no chance of ever being freed. He works with the youth in the prison, and he shares the truths of Yah, and he is a very strong believer. And he also has written the program that they use before the youth get out of prison. So if everyone could pray for this man and realize that Joseph is someone who also experienced all those years in prison, and yet Yahuwah granted him freedom and a wonderful life. So if you could pray for Michael, that he will one day be set free in order to share his life with more youth. That is his wish. He wants to start a program for youth in risk. So I would appreciate that very much, and Fred too. So thank you very much for listening to that.
Thank you, Barbara. Indeed, I know when we spent some time with you at Sukkot, you were able to share a little bit more, and definitely is very heart-wrenching and also heartwarming, the work. Just scrolling up here. Yes, that's the code of airship, not the airship. And Greg says they'll sell you to the Tuscan Raiders. Yeah, don't want that. Rick says it is our responsibility to keep the robes we have been given clean. Raymond says, although donning the code of airship is a pretty cool idea. Yeah, that's the next item in the MTOI marketplace. But yes, to all of those who put Yeshua, of course, in terms of his robe, I was referring to the robe in terms of the Hebrew phrase. I wasn't clear, sorry. That was related to the connection with Tamar, David's daughter. But yes, absolutely, Yeshua, and we see the imagery of Messiah here. Just so beautiful. The thrown into the pit. He should have died, but he didn't die. The robe of authority was stripped, torn and dipped in blood. He's sold for silver. I mean, we see our Messiah right in this, leaping out of it. We know the fulfillment and the cyclical nature in the Hebraic mindset. So absolutely, we have to keep our robes clean before the Son, before the Father, and that robe that we're given, is a responsibility, and that we might get it, ripped and torn by others, but we ultimately know that we have the responsibility for ourselves to keep it clean and be like our Messiah. So absolutely correct in terms of the imagery of Yeshua. So before we go to 38, because I know we had some questions there, I'm just going to touch on something here in 37. Also read up. Rabbi Tom added to Shamash Losi's comment, which I think is a very important lesson, got me to thinking about Yosef interpreting the baker's dream. While we must try to be kind and empathetic toward all, we must not shirk from speaking the truth or the word that Yah has given us. Tell it like it is. That's what we love about you, Rabbi Tom, and such an important aspect. And also that related verse in terms of, those who love and guard the commands cannot be offended. So absolutely tell it like it is. and maybe we can see Yah's will in that. Somebody put, what might seem to be the worst thing to happen can become the best thing you never expected. Amen. If we trust, we have full emunah, right? Full control, that the Creator has full control, fully in charge, and we simply need to just sit in His hands obediently in the fullness of the intent as walked out by our Messiah. Okay, in 37, we'll touch on this. In verse 13, does the end of that verse remind you of anybody? The hineni, the here I am? Abraham, Moshe. My wife said Samuel, also correct. Many. I mean, there's probably some, I didn't make a list of everyone, but the point being of the hineni is the here I am, right? This is a verse, a phrase, not just, oh yeah, I'm here, I'm present. For example, Rabbi's latest in focus, hanging out in the hall. Not just, oh yeah, I'm here, I showed up, great, count me in, but I'm here, reporting for duty, ready to serve and to follow out what you have intended for me, the Almighty, and of course those, the high level of honor and respect to those in authority. So I always feel the hineni is always really meaningful to point out. Beth, yes, the most appropriate response to Yah's call, hineni. Here I am. The imagery of in the Brit Chadashah in the New Testament of preparing yourself. This relates to the garment itself, the robe. And so if you say, here I am, if you answer that call, we will be actively preparing ourselves for the marriage. Hineni, it means here I am in Hebrew, here I am.
Okay, so just a quick note about the hineni, that it's very contextual. These additional layers of meaning are implied by the context, and its literal meaning really is just the here I am. It's all of these other things are contextual, and they're very important bits of context as well. But you wouldn't want to think that it's the literal meaning, otherwise it gets very confusing when Abraham says hineni to his son Yitzhak when they're on their way to Moriah. And so the literal meaning does still just come through as, here I am, what do you want, that kind of thing. But in the context of the relationship, between the subordinate to the authority is where we're finding all of these additional layers. And so very important lessons in that, presenting yourself in readiness, reporting to the one who is able to command you and tell you what to do, or to give you counsel, etc. Just important to know that this is contextual stuff, not literal.
Absolutely. Thank you, Raymond, for bringing that to light. So yes, the literal, of course, here I am, and then the contextuals we can see played out in many circumstances of responding to the call of the Almighty. Okay, I know we're 7:25 here, so just to touch on something else in 37 that I think is really, really beautiful. So in verses 14 and 15, in terms of when Yosef is sent out to find the brothers and the brothers with the sheep, and specifically the ones doing the shepherding, Yosef sent by his father. What imagery does that bring to light? Really beautiful imagery there. Yeshua? Correct, yeah, my wife said Yeshua. Yes, we have beautiful imagery, and of course it's not exact in terms of the 10 tribes, because Judah would be involved in the brothers here, and part of the brothers that Joseph is going to find, but the verse here, it's beautiful. Please go and see if it is well with your brothers and well with the sheep, and bring back word to me. really just wonderful imagery of being sent out to find the lost sheep, to regather. Yeshua sent by his Father. And of course, we see here the shepherds servicing the flock and the lost sheep. Really beautiful hidden message there. Was the man an angel? So the common interpretation often is yes, most likely a messenger, possibly the angel Gabriel. So again here, because we can see, and I know Raymond actually touched on this in previous Torah portion, that because it's by Shechem, at that point there wouldn't actually be any males. And so the certain man finding him and knowing where the brothers went seemed to be a little bit more than the human plane, if that makes sense. So absolutely, I think, Alice, that there is a messenger aspect here. And also, actually, thank you for asking that, because in verse 15, and I was just studying the book of Yochanan, the book of John, this past Shabbat, these, and I'm not saying that this man here is Yeshua, but I'm saying that it mirrors it, that the words here, what do you seek, are the very first words that Yeshua says in the book of John. When they go to him and they say, and Yochanan says, look, this is the Lamb of Elohim, and they call out to him, and Yeshua turns around and says, what do you seek? So I think that is, that's really the question for all of us. It's why we're all here. We were all seeking something, all seeking the truth. And so it's a beautiful question. What do you seek? Because it could be very succinct and very broad all at once. So I just think it's a beautiful connection there in, the being sent out to recover the lost sheep, the regathering of our nation. Bo Yeshua, please come Yeshua. But the what do you seek, I think it really indicates what this is all about, all on our journey to end up back home in the kingdom. Yes, thank you, Raymond. Yochanan 1:38. And Yeshua, turning and seeing them following, said to them, what do you seek? And they said to him, Rabbi, which means teacher. He copied and pasted directly from the ISR. Where are you staying? So yeah, thank you, Raymond, for that. Okay, now to 38. Unless someone has any questions. Oh, well, perfect, Ali, because that leads right into chapter 38. Did Tamar deviously enact Deuteronomy 25, 5-10, by preserving the line of heir through his father Yehuda? Okay, so someone questions see, chapter 38 seems a bit out of place. We have the story of Yosef interrupted with the account of Yehuda and Tamar. So we'll get to your question, Ali. In terms of being out of place, you could see this, but you can also see possibly the aspect of Yehuda's involvement in the selling, right? And we can see that also hinting at the selling of Yeshua for silver. That must have been, pretty traumatic, seeing his father mourn, right? And he even mentions the word Sheol at the end there, meaning grave. That I'd rather die. I will go to my grave mourning my son Yosef. And then Yehuda turns to his brothers. So this account possibly, actually, and if you want to listen to the previous recordings, we addressed this, that this is an account that actually brings Yehuda back. There's an aspect here that is actually very important. So it does seem odd, but I think there's a lot here. And so in terms of Ali's question about Deuteronomy 25, that is referring to the Levirate marriage, also, which is also known as the law of Chalitza. So the brother who is then responsible, if so choose, to take up the brother's lineage if that brother dies. So did she deviously enact it? I would say no. Did she enact it and force the issue? Possibly, yes. As we can see actually in the end of, or towards the end of the chapter, Judah actually says, right? Yehuda says, she is more righteous than I. And so we can see here that he recognized, because of the violation of the Levirate marriage, the law of Chalitza, which was the brother Onan, and that's what this is about in verse 9. Right? This has nothing to do with birth control. This is to do with violation of something that was a custom, and then also we can see in Deuteronomy 25 is an aspect of the law. Because of that violation, Yehuda then basically played off the issue, because he said, okay, I'll give you my other son, but possibly didn't really even want to, because the other two brothers had died. And so then Tamar, seeing this, with the actually legally and lawfully deserving desire for a child that she was entitled to through that custom and through that law, even though, yes, it was sinful, there was adultery, there was incest, Yehuda recognized that she was righteous in the fact that she was entitled to that child. So it wasn't devious. She knew who he was when she covered herself. He did not, but she did that because she knew what she had to do in order to get that child, which is why Yehuda's reaction was as such. So I hope that makes sense. David and Amy says this brotherly understanding was pre-Torah. Absolutely, this is what this is about, the levirate marriage. That's levirate, not Levite, levirate. Lever, brother. I know Raymond can give us more context there in the chat box. Carrie says, was it common for men to use a prostitute? Doesn't seem appropriate in Torah. It's not appropriate, and I think that's an interesting point. Also, we can see what happens in the customs of other lands and other peoples. That Yehuda, when he went to ask for her, just asked about a prostitute, but then when he sent the messengers, they asked, "Where's the cult prostitute?" So we can see here also the aspect of idolatry that could lead from prostitution, and how even though Yehuda didn't recognize that, there was a strong aspect of that going on. Curtis, you there? So, hand was raised, but if you have something to say, please, by all means.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
There we go. Shalom, everyone. What a great Torah portion study and the contributions. Just fantastic. Great job. Nice work too, David, on that. I was just going to say.
You're a bit low, Curtis. I don't know if you can talk closer to the mic.
Can you still hear me? Sorry.
That's much.
My apologies. I'm just trying to come in via my phone, but just saying how much I enjoyed the study today and the great job and the contributions by everyone.
It's low. It's low again. There you go.
I don't know why that.
Stay there.
I'll stay there. What I wanted to say on the lead up, and get essentially into a level understanding of this, but I think it's important when we're looking at the typology of Joseph to Yeshua. When you really look at the revelation of Yeshua, and you get into chapter 7 and verse 14, where the washing of the robes directly into chapter 22:14 in Revelation. And this cleaning of the robes is actually washing in the blood of Messiah. And it denotes sovereignty on our part, that there is a responsibility to do this, and no one will enter in but by the blood of Messiah. And so it's an important thing that in our works alone, we will not get there. None are righteous, not one. And even in his fallen state, he wouldn't declare that upon himself. But then the sinless lamb was raised unto righteousness. We have this beautiful picture playing out in the book of Revelation. We understand that the sovereignty of man is meeting the sovereignty of the Messiah, washing these robes and entering into the city. And so that incredible typology actually exists in the shadow picture contained in this Torah portion. So I just thought it was something to really sort of emphasize just how serious the revelation of Yeshua does link into the way you've been discussing the typology in the portion today. That's all.
Thank you, Curtis. I know we're fading out. I'll just try to summarize it. Curtis was referring to the washing of the robes as washing in the blood of Messiah, and the seriousness of that preparation of our garments, and that is a criteria to the entering, and we have to go through that process. Curtis, if you want to go ahead and type in the verses that you mentioned, also if anything else you wanted to add, so I do not misquote you. But Curtis was referring to the typology of Yeshua here in this Torah portion, the washing of the blood that we must go through, that we are covered in. We must wash that. That is the process.
Yeah, it's a good summary. The robes, in essence, have a relation or link to actually the wedding garment, and so this coming in to the city gates or coming through and this washing. The real importance is that there is a sovereignty of man and their creator meeting. And so the washing of the robes is a process that we enter into when we truly come into repentance. And so the verses I was referring to, just for the length of this conversation and discussion in the Torah portion, is Revelation 7:14. And then further on in the revelation of Messiah, you'll see in chapter 22:14. And to my mind, when I read this portion of the Torah portion, those scriptures particularly come to mind in this part of the Torah portion.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Curtis. Always appreciate that insight. Connection to the robes, the wedding garments. It is what this is about. We all must be in that active state of teshuvah, turning back, of repentance, and heart circumcision. Couple comments here relating to chapter 38. Interesting that Yah gave her 2 sons after she lost 2 husbands. That is interesting. And then Raymond clarifies, yes, independent of the Sinai covenant. This is the leveret. With lever, root is Latin for husband's brother. Thank you. And yes, before its full revelation and independent of the Sinai covenant, the leveret marriage was part of the ancient Near East custom. So thank you for that addition. I hope that kind of makes sense to how I was explaining 38. That is not necessarily trickery, but she did enact that, right? And that Yehuda did have an obligation to provide that. And therefore, sinful as her deeds were and his deeds, she wasn't motivated by lust, but that lawful desire for a child. As per that, to clarify, this is not the same as the Christianese covered by the blood of Jesus. There's a lot in that statement. We are covered by Yeshua's blood, his death, and I would recommend here, what did Yeshua do? Asking us, David. No, absolutely, David and Amy, I appreciate that. What did Yeshua do? Also, Yeshua the rock. And of course, the are you saved? That we are covered by Yeshua's blood. He paid the penalty of death that we had, and we were legally liable to. But in terms of covered by the blood, I didn't go through that system, but I would recommend those teachings. But it is different because we have to go through an active process of washing our robes, of cleaning our garments, of preparing ourselves, which, to what I know of and what you're saying in terms of the Christianese, covered by that everything is now acceptable, which we know is not the same. I hope that made sense. If somebody else wants to jump in and clarify that before we continue. I would recommend what did Yeshua do? Also Yeshua the rock, to really understand that nuance. Obviously, it's not downplaying the importance of the blood by any means, but understanding the context of that blood and our relationship to that blood, versus possibly the Christianity's interpretation of that blood and what the blood does. Okay. Did Tamar become a Hebrew as Ruth did in terms of the kind of grafting in? I think it's quite possible, that same aspect of wanting to join that lineage, grafting in. We can see actually in Matthew 1:3, we see that she is in the lineage of Messiah, as well as the two sons, Peretz and Zerah, which also is a nice imagery, once more, of the firstborn aspect, as well as the scarlet thread Again, we can spend hours on this. But yes, that we see here, Raymond says, in Jewish lore concerning Tamar, it's thought she was the daughter of Shem. Yep, agreed. And a prophetess, which explains her dedication to ensuring Yehuda's line continues, as well as the penalty which she was thought to have dishonored her priestly father by whoring. Leviticus 21:9, and when the daughter of any priest profanes herself by whoring, she profanes her father, she is burned with fire. Hence, Yehuda's reaction in terms of bring her to be burnt, because of that seriousness of that. And so, yes, connected to the lineage, and kind of going to summarize chapter 38, which I hope we can, leave, the study with, that there was an aspect, again, in Abba's will. If you look at the sons that were killed, the wicked ones, one who doesn't explain it, and the other who was deliberately not wanting to continue with that custom, which we see later in Deuteronomy, that Abba's will of keeping the Canaanites out of the lineage of Messiah. And we see here this aspect, again, even though from our human lens it looks not the best, and it wasn't, but there's a will going on here, that we must always respect and regard. We can see this in the Brit, in Matthew 1:3, as I stated before in the lineage. Beth Smith, another parallel to Yeshua, in 44, Joseph was put in charge of them, and he served them, servant leader. Awesome, thank you for that. That is great. You see Yeshua as a servant leader, the one, dismissing the crowds. He's the one at the very end, and that we must learn how to lead by learning how to follow. Nancy, was it then just Yehuda's one son or three sons fathered the entire tribe of Judah? You're referring to which sons? The ones that were born here at the end of 38? Okay. Any other questions about 38 or 39? And we'll finish up the last 10, 15 minutes with chapter 40. Oh, the one left of the three brothers and Tamar's sons. Correct, right. What was his name? Shelah, and the other two, I don't know. We see here in the lineage that it's just the two sons. And what I've studied out is that the other son, even though he might have been regarded as the husband of Tamar, it was never consummated, because it was never given. He was never given to her like that. So it would just be the two sons here that are actually in the lineage going forward. I don't know if that answers your question, but we see that's the only generation going forward from them, that Shelah did not have that. Mark Oswald, did Joseph let his guard down? Chapter 39, verses 10 to 11. Knowing that Potiphar's wife was interested in him, should he have been alone in the house with her? Likewise, we have to be on guard against persons or things that threaten our walk relationship with Yah, and to be careful not to let our guard. Absolutely. We have to be careful of situations, and the situations that we're in, not let our guard down. Regardless, no pun intended. So thank you for bringing that, Mark. Not sure. Does anyone have any other thoughts about 39? It very, very is possible. And again, we look at Yah's will in terms of he had to end up in prison in order for his then connection to Pharaoh later. So again, it's possible he let his guard down. It's also possible that she was making these accusations, because we can see here in verse 14, see he has brought us a Hebrew to mock us. So there definitely seems something there in terms of her not really liking the idea of the Hebrew leading the household, because that's what it says, right? That the master saw that Yah was with him. This is verse 3, and that Yah made all he did to prosper in his hand. So Joseph was very respected, very esteemed. Okay. David Amy says, I thought Potiphar's wife gave the men the day off. that's true too. Again, we don't really know, but again, I think the key here is, what is our witness that the Almighty is with us, right? He's working for Potiphar out of the camp, right? A captain, of the guard, an officer of Pharaoh. Are we a trustworthy employee? Are we a top producer? It's a great in focus by Rabbi Steve. So I think that witness here, right? Because the master, and we see this even with Lavan, right? The master, saw that Yahweh was with him, and Yahweh made all he did to prosper in his hand. So, when we witness, when we bear that beautiful fruit, then others are blessed by that, and they might ask, they might inquire. But that requires integrity, that requires honesty, that requires, like Mark said, not letting our guard down, not being complacent, protecting ourselves. Correct? See, it said that in some commentaries that it was Joseph's father's prayers that protected him. It's possible too. There's a lot here. We see that the Almighty is with Joseph, no matter the situation, which brings the book of Philippians. No matter the situation, no matter the condition. I know what it is to be hungry. I know what it is to be, to be content, to be filled. And we see Joseph in a matter of a chapter of being in charge of this household, respected household, of being in prison. David and Amy says we need to see even when Yah is with us doesn't mean smooth sailing on calm seas. Smooth seas never made a skilled sailor. Amen. And they are often tumultuous seas. They could be calm seas, but we have to be wise in our boat. And that verse there for Philippians is 4:12. I'll put that in. Rob and Tamara, an example to flee, run from sin. Yeah, we see here in verse 9 an example of, again, another pre-Sinai, pre-revelation, completely instructed, commanded aspect, saying, how shall I do this great evil and sin against Elohim? So he's here, and this is something that I made a note of, is that the ways of Yah, right, that they're timeless. They're timeless. They were instructed to us to make us live, of course, to set ourselves apart. And this, the Sinai and instructions and everything, obviously not downplaying in any way, shape, or form, holding it up to the level that needs to be held up. But you can see that the ways are timeless. And we see this in many aspects with Noah, with the food. We see this with the circumcision. We see this, this is chapter before with the levirate marriage. We see it here with adultery. And Ali, quoting Bilam, cannot go beyond the word of Yahweh. Amen. His ways are timeless. Right? And I think it also shows a way of what we're supposed to become and who we're supposed to become, which is Yeshua, our Messiah, that we were always supposed to rely on the letter, right? The fullness, the effortless. If we actually have that new heart, right? If we make ourselves ready, if we clean our wedding garments, our robes, and washing in the blood of Yeshua, who took away our penalty for death, if we get ourselves ready, then it should be effortless. Of course, we can't in our fallen state, but that is where we're going to. And so I think it's interesting here in Galatians 5:22, the fruit of the Spirit, the next verse, against which there is no Torah, right? I think, a lot of misinterpretation there, but that if we're in the fullness of it, walking out Yeshua and knowing the timeless ways of Yah, regardless whether they were commanded at any point in time, that we, in the fullness of it, cannot be, there are no consequences because we are walking completely in the footsteps of our Master. So praise Yah, and that point where we can all have that new heart, that we get ourselves and that we work and are going towards to be caused, and our life situations cause us to seek and to work on that new heart. See, the Hoffman family, Yosef knew Abba Father was watching him. He was aware he was with him and feared him. Eternal always stands the test of time. Amen. Fear Yah and leave the consequences with him. Raymond adds 2 things about Yosef being in the house alone with her. We should credit Yosef that he was not aware she was alone inside before he entered the house. There's not evidence to my awareness, this is number 2, of the principle of forbidden seclusion being widely established, a Near East custom, until after influence from the Sinai covenant. Yosef was a bit naive, but there's no reason to think he was being foolhardy here. Thank you. And that said, yes, we can learn from this and guard ourselves. So yes, guard ourselves and understand that if we are walking in fullness, if we are obeying, if we are really, being obedient to the voice of the Father, and guarding, then it possibly, slowly, just like Rabbi Steve's the example with a car. At first, when you drove a car, you had the gas pedal, the brake pedal, the signals, the mirrors, the radio was a challenge, but then now you drive it effortlessly. Well, that should and is our goal in Torah. Yeshua is that goal, effortless, complete perfection. And we know that he is our Messiah and the Son of the esteemed Elohim, but we, even in our fallen state, can set our eyes on that prize. We know that goal, the fullness that is Messiah, and that it can become effortless. And we understand that the instructions, the commandments given were always meant to bring us back to that. And like Curtis said, not rely on just, oh, look, I'm doing this, right? Look, I wear my tzitziot now. I'm good. Well, are those tzitziot in your heart? Are the remembrance of the commands in your heart? Of course, yes. Wear them then. I'm not saying otherwise. But we can't cling. This goes back to the whitewashed tombs. We know Rabbi teaches this in the heart of the matter. We can't cling to the exterior appearance of our Torah observance to justify our righteousness before our King. All right, just a couple minutes before we close it off. Just wanted to talk about.
So I was just going to say that comment on Joseph and the temptation there. Couldn't agree more with Raymond's statement, because this is interesting when you understand that when we walk in Torah and by the blood of Messiah, we are going to be tempted by spiritual adultery. And there is a shadow picture of this playing out there as well. And he was able to stay away from that. And that's why, that question with, is this Christianese? In fact, it's just the opposite. I use these verses to speak to Christians, to say that this is a matter of your sovereignty to walk in his ways. And you can do that because of the blood. It's the exact opposite of Christianese. And so you get this two sides of the river. One's trying to do it all in works and Torah obedience. One's trying to make the blood of Messiah a license for licentiousness. And neither is actually the true river perspective in understanding these incredible shadow pictures. So what Raymond said there regarding Joseph, I just wanted to say was fantastic, because essentially this is happening to all of us in our journey if we walk in Torah and by the blood of Messiah.
Amen. Amen. Exactly. Curtis nailed it. Yeah, this exact opposite. By that blood, we are able to then walk. The exact opposite of the Christianese. So thank you. And then just to finally to close with this, of course, the blood of Messiah, and we know in the testimonies in the Brit, Yeshua saying, this is my blood, this is my body. Referring, as we know, Rabbi teaches, to the Kiddush and Motzi, dating all the way back to Melchizedek, a custom that Yeshua would know his taught ones would be familiar with, and to use it as a teaching opportunity. I just read something today. I mean, this is just completely my opinion. But again, thought a beautiful imagery here is that we see the dreams have to do with grapes and bread. And I thought, beautiful imagery of, the fruit of the vine and the blessing of the Kiddush, and the Hamotzi, bringing the bread from the earth, the blood and the body of Messiah. And that ultimately we see that the wine, the grapes, it's restored to the position. We know that our master is sitting at the right hand, and that the bread, the body, although destroyed, the blood covers us. The blood lives, and Yeshua himself will come back as reigning king. So I thought that was a beautiful imagery with the dreams, a possible interpretation of there. And we see there in chapter 40 In verse 8, it says, "Do not interpretations belong to Elohim?" So we can see possible another hint here of the will of the Father and the Master Yeshua being fulfilled here through this. And so that he, Joseph in his righteousness and him walking with Hashem, with the Almighty, would be able to see what would happen, to be able to see what these dreams might mean. Not that he's relating himself to Elohim, but that he and his connection could offer them up and possibly receive interpretation. So yeah, the fullness of the intent of Messiah, the blood will always prevail, despite his body being killed, and he was restored at the right hand, just like the cupbearer, with the grapes, was restored. We'll finish up in a second. You're confused about something, Amy? Maybe it'd be best to contact. It's more specific. What about the baker? Is anyone? I know we're almost about time. I was just referring to connecting it to Yeshua saying, "Bread is my body, and the wine is my blood," and so simply giving an image. And again, this is not determining anything in particular broken for us. I mean, I wasn't getting into the specifics of the baker himself. I'm saying that the body of Messiah, although killed in the fleshly body, that we have the blood, and the blood covers us, as we were talking about before, and that we must cleanse ourselves in this whole imagery of Messiah in the story of Yosef here, being thrown into the pit, should have died but didn't die, his robe of authority being stripped, torn and dipped in blood, sold for silver, all of that. And then the final thing here, which would just about finish up, is the last verse in 23 in chapter 40. The chief cupbearer did not remember Yosef, but forgot him. And so we must always remember the kindness that people do for us and take it with us. And I think that's another important lesson today and all days, to remember the small things and to continue to plant those seeds of the fruit of the Spirit. Yes, David and Amy, I was talking about the dreams in chapter 40. And yes, Raymond, yes, there's another aspect of it as well. The hanging of the baker is a possible hint at Mashiach's betrayer. The one who prepared our bread was hanged by himself. I was simply relating the bread and the wine to the idea of the vine and the bread from the earth, Mashiach comparing the bread and the wine to his body and his blood, and tying it all the way back to the imagery of Messiah we see here in Yosef. Okay, so that's it. I hope that was a blessing to everybody. We're exactly on 8 o'clock. And so I hope it nourished you in some way. Appreciate all your questions. Every year is different on these Torah studies, so I'm glad we can put 2018 Vayeshev in the books and it be distinctly different from the other ones as well. And that's a credit to the structure, credit to Rabbi Steve, Raymond, who led last year's, because you go back and listen and you can really glean so much from this wonderful structure and wonderful exercise, which it is, in reading the portion, to read it over and over again. So I recommend that highly, to go back to listen to previous recordings, because as we know, we can spend hours on this, but the imagery here and just the beautifulness of the word is timeless. So thank you for participating. And yeah, Terry, Shalom, Beth Yachad, 2 hours south from us, part of our congregation. David, once again, thankful for the leadership and various layers, our family that teach us. Exactly what I said, but much more succinct, so thank you. Exactly. The various layers, blessed Torah study. Thank you. No, thank you all. It's the participants that make it. Thank you to Shamash Robert, of course, for guiding us and the announcements, for Brother Raymond and Curtis. Thank you for that. Very, very awesome insight into everything. So we'll need one of the men before we do the countdown to close us in prayer. Again, I appreciate everyone taking their time out of their busy schedule to join us tonight. So men, get your hands up. As Rabbi says, we all must be comfortable and prepared to pray in front of one another. Okay, I see. Let's go with, see, is that
Can you guys hear me? Our Almighty Father, our Almighty Elohim, our Creator, Father, we just humbly come before you to thank you and praise you because you're righteous and you're good. And just want to thank you for tonight's study and the leadership that we have to be able to learn your ways. And Father, just thank you so much for all your blessings. In Yeshua's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Kirk. So we'll go ahead and start the countdown. So as we count down, typical fashion here, take the time to say Laila Tov. I'll get it started with a couple quick ones. We will see you on Shabbat, Yah willing, as we meet again to honor a wonderful Creator and His will and His plan. Laila Tov, thank you to everyone. Again, it's nothing without you. It's nothing without the participation, your questions, your comments. A bunch of Laila Tovs. See you on the live stream. Thank you, Raymond, again, for putting in the number system. Shalom, shalom. Again, for the Hanukkah teachings, they're in the MTOI Facebook group, and we'll be going out with a Facebook page post Sunday morning. Shalom, shalom. Laila Tov. Curtis, thanks again for joining us from the future in New Zealand. Blessings to you and Pip. Ali says shalom, neighbor, to Curtis. All right, just about there. Shalom, shalom. Thank you for joining us. That will do it. And we will see you on Shabbat. Amen. Amen.